Hey everybody, Rob here at etrailer.com, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Roadmaster Brake-Lite Relay on our 2013 Honda CR-V. Now whenever we're towing our CR-V, we need to have our lights. And we can see we have our motorhome turn signal on and it is going to the back of our CR-V, but the problem comes in when you have a supplemental braking system. When that braking system applies the brakes to our CR-V, it's actually going to bypass the turn signal and it's going to go solid. So if I push on the brake pedal, we can see that the motorhome is still blinking, but our CR-V has completely stopped. That's a really unsafe thing, because if we're going down the highway, we need to change lanes, but we just happen to slow down a little bit, our blinker's not going to be blinking, could cause a little bit of a communication issue with other drivers, or potentially get us a ticket. But our BrakeLite Relay is going to allow us to tow our CR-V, and it's going to cut that signal out while we're towing it, so our blinker will still work. Now that we have our relay inside and installed, if I push on the brake pedal, you can see that both of them are still blinking. But at the same time, whenever we're not towing our CR-V and we're not hooked up to the electrical, our brake signal is going to work just like normal, so we can rest assured we can still drive our CR-V normally. So keep in mind that's only going to be one component of a safe, complete flat tow setup. There's going to be 5 major components that every car is going to need. The first one is going to be the base plate. That's what's going to be the connection point so that we can hook up to our motorhome and use our tow bar. The next one is going to be your tow bar, and that's what's going to hook to the base plate and to your motorhome so you can safely pull your car down the road. After that, we're going to need safety cables, which are going to be our secondary line of defense in case our tow bar fails and there's an accidental disconnection. Next, we're going to need wiring. Now, there's going to be several different kinds of wiring, but I always suggest diodes if your car can use it, because that way we don't have anything extra to set up, and it's going to use the car's taillights to get the signals. Then finally, we're going to have our braking system. Now, a braking system is going to be required in almost every state, and for good reason. We're putting a lot of weight behind our motorhome, and we're asking it a lot when we slow down, because not only does it need to slow itself down, but now we added a couple thousand pounds behind it. So a braking system is going to allow our CR-V to slow itself down, so we're not putting so much strain and stress on our motorhome. Now specifically for our CR-V, I do recommend the Roadmaster Fuse Fuse Bypass, because if you look in your owner's manual, you are going to be required to pull a fuse, and it's just a lot easier to hit a switch rather than having to pull the fuse, crawl under the dash, put it in the cup holder, remember to put it back. It's just a lot easier, flip a switch, and you can be on your way. One last component that I do recommend is going to be the Roadmaster Brake-Lite Relay. Now what that's going to do is that's going to prevent our CR-V from overriding the turn signals that were coming from our motorhome. If we're going down the road, we're going down the highway, want to change lanes, but at the same time we may need to slow down a little bit. If we hit our brakes in our motorhome and have a supplemental braking system on our CR-V, that brake signal is going to cut our blinker out and it'll go solid in the back, which means it's going to be really unsafe driving around. But that BrakeLite Relay will allow us to not have that happen, but when we're driving normally, our brake lights will work just fine. Now as far as the installation goes, it is going to take place underneath the dash. All of it's going to be hidden once it's installed, but we'll go ahead and walk through everything and show you how to test and hook everything up. The beginner installation, we want to come to the driver's side, and we're going to move right underneath the steering wheel on the underside of the dash. There's going to be a panel under here. I have a quick turn knob here. We can turn that and pull that panel down. This panel here is going to have all your fuse locations and everything on it. And right next to our emergency brake pedal, we'll have this little knob. Just want to turn it. That'll allow us to pull this panel down, and we'll set it aside for right now. So we follow our brake pedal arm up, we'll find our brake switch. Now there's a small tab on the white section of the connector. Most likely it'll be on top. If we squeeze that tab, we can actually disconnect it from the switch itself. To make it a little bit easier for us, because we need to remove this tape so we can get access to the wires underneath. Now I suggest using a knife, but cutting where there is loom so we have less chance of cutting these wires on the inside. Small cut. We can move the tape out of the way and move the loom out of the way as well. Now we can go ahead and plug it back in, making sure we can still access the wires here. And now we're going to test each one of these wires, and we're going to be testing for the cold side of the brake switch. What that means is we're going to get a 12-volt power source only when the brake pedal is depressed. We shouldn't have any voltage when the brake pedal is released. So now you can see I have my tester hooked up and I'm currently on the blue wire that's on my switch. Now with nothing pushing on the brake pedal, we're getting 0 volts. But as soon as I press on it, we're getting almost 12. So this is going to be the wire we want to use, the blue wire that's coming off the brake switch. Now I went ahead and pulled down the connector just so I can get access to the wire a little bit easier. But now that we've identified the cold side of the brake switch, we want to come down from that connector a little bit. And we're going to cut the wire in half. And you're going to want to strip back both ends. Now it is pretty thin wire, so I like to strip back a little bit more than normal. That way I can fold the wire over and just holds on to everything a little bit better. Once we have both of them stripped, we're going to take the blue butt connectors out of our kit and we'll clip it on to the end of each wire. Now again, it's really thin wire, so I like to fold it over like that. That way it has a little bit more to bite onto inside that butt connector. So we'll go ahead and crimp on a blue butt connector onto each end of our stripped wires. So at this point, we can grab our relay harness, and we're going to have a total of 5 wires coming out of it. A black one, red one, green, white, and blue. Now in our application, we're not going to be using this blue wire at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come real close to where the connector is for our relay, and I'm going to cut the end of it off, leaving myself a little bit of a tail, just so I can wrap everything up with some electrical tape at the end here. But we can move back to our connectors here. Now the side that's going to be closest to the actual brake switch, so the one that's going to that connector, we want to take the green wire and attach it to that butt connector. Now these are already pre-stripped, so we can just pull the insulation off. It's a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and cut a little bit of off. Then we'll take our green wire, we're going to put it in the end closest to that connector. Make sure it goes all the way in our butt connector and we'll crimp it down. On the other end of the wire that's furthest from the switch, we want to take our black wire, put it into our butt connector and crimp it down. At this point, we can take our brake switch plug it back into the brake switch. It's not a bad idea to double check your connections, give it a quick tug, make sure they're not going to come loose. Now we're going to have 2 more wires that we're going to work with. Our white wire here is going to be our ground wire. Now we can use the self-tapping screw and find a nice spot of sheet metal, or we can find an existing screw that's going to the body so we know it's going to be a solid ground. So I think if we've come back here, this would be a really good spot because it's going to be on the outside of our brake pedal. It's definitely going directly to the body and it won't interfere with any of our other pedals here. Now for our ground wire, they are going to give us a ring terminal in our kit, and if you're using the self-tapping screw, that'll be perfectly fine. But this ring terminal is not going to fit over our stud that's on our firewall. So instead, I'm going to replace it with a larger ring terminal that I know will fit. And you can find these larger ones here at etrailer.com. And then we'll just take our ring terminal. Again, I'm just going to fold my wire over so there's a little bit more to grab onto. Slide my ring terminal over, and we'll crimp it down. And then for the bolt we're going to be using as a stud, again, right back here where our emergency brake pedal is, I'm going to be using an extension and a 12mm socket to pull that nut off. You remove the nut, take that ring terminal, slide it over the stud, then we replace the nut. You just want to make sure that ring terminal is making contact behind the nut there. Take our 12mm socket, tighten everything up. And you do want to double check, make sure that ring terminal isn't moving. I'm just going to loosen it up just a bit. I'm going to turn my ring terminal to the side. or even up. Then tighten it down. That way, whenever I tie my wires up, I can tie them under the dash and I don't have to worry about any kind of interference. So we should have one more wire left. It's going to be our red wire. Go ahead and pull the insulation off the back. Fold that wire over again. Now we want to grab the fuse holder out of our kit. It's already going to have a butt connector pre-installed on it. So we just take our red wire and crimp it down onto the butt connector. So now if we move underneath the dash, we go just to the left of our brake pedal, we'll find our fuse panel. And we're going to be testing these fuses, and we need to find a fuse that only has power when the key is in the run position. So if I start testing some of these fuses with the key in the off position, we can see this 20 amp one here has power all the time. Because key's not on, engine's not running, but that fuse still has power. We don't want to use a fuse like that. We want to check for power with the key off, and then turn the key on to the run position and see if we have power at the fuse. So we're going to go ahead and test these, and we'll let you know which one we use and make sure that it does not have power when the key's off, but it does when the key is on. So we went through testing, and we're actually going to use this 15 amp fuse here. It's going to be fuse number 28, and it's going to be for our washer fluid. Now if I tested the key is in the on position right now, and you see we're getting power, but if I turn the key off, you can see that we lose power. So that's a good thing. We want to go ahead and use this fuse, so we'll grab a pair of needle nose pliers and pull that out. When we pull our fuse out, you'll notice that it's going to be a low profile fuse. This is not going to fit into our fuse holder, but you can see that the terminals are going to fit back from our fuse holder back into the panel. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to pick up the factory size, a 15 amp fuse, but not a low profile, just a normal mini fuse. And when we look at our fuse tap, we'll have two spots. We want to put our factory fuse closest to the prongs, so we're on the bottom. Make sure it goes all the way in. Then we can grab the 10 amp fuse out of our kit and put it in the other slot on top. You just want to make sure it goes all the way in and they're both sitting nice and flush. Then we can take our fuse tap and we're going to plug it directly into where we pulled the fuse out of. Now we can grab our relay and we can plug it in. Now if you're worried about plugging it in wrong, you can only plug it in one way. The pins aren't going to line up unless you have it sitting the correct way, but once you do, it's pretty easy to get in there. It's maybe a little bit of a tight fit, but plug it in, and then we can just clean up all the loose wires under here, make sure it's not going to interfere with our emergency brake pedal or any of the other pedals underneath the dash. Then we can take that lower panel that we removed earlier and lift it back up, make sure all the tabs click in, and turn that tab counterclockwise to lock it in place. But again, I'm Rob here at etrailer.com. That'll finish up your look at the Roadmaster Brake-Lite Relay on our 2013 Honda CR-V.